Jake Paul isn't the weakest man in the world, but compared to a lot of UFC stars, he's pretty much an ant. Today I'm going to cover 5 UFC stars who would destroy Jake Paul in a fight. Welcome back to Stars in Sports, let's get into the video. Number 1, Conor McGregor J. An obvious starting point here would be former UFC lightweight champion Conor McGregor, the biggest star in UFC history. The notorious one has sold millions of pay-per-views in his 7 years with the promotion and is set to headline the first big UFC show of 2021 against Dustin Poirier. Of course, McGregor has also dabbled in boxing, suffering a 10th round TKO at the great Floyd Mayweather's hands in 2017. All this means that purely from a financial standpoint, it makes sense for Jake Paul to have called the Irishman out for a fight, even if he had no reason to get so vulgar and personal. But despite being around 4 inches taller and around 40 pounds heavier than McGregor, there's no doubt that the Irishman would absolutely destroy Jake Paul should he step into a fight against him. Not only does McGregor have remarkably fast and accurate punches, but he's not just a boxer. The notorious one loves to throw kicks when he steps into the octagon, and naturally someone like Jake Paul probably has very little experience in taking such strikes. Add in McGregor's ability to use unorthodox strikes, as we saw when he hurt Donald Cerrone with shoulder thrusts in their fight at UFC 246, and there can be no doubt that Jake Paul would be in trouble for this fight. Number 2, Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz has recently started using his Twitter account to throw abuse at Jake Paul. Another UFC star who's gotten into a Twitter spat with Jake Paul this week is former UFC lightweight title challenger Nate Diaz. 2016 saw Diaz enter into a heavily publicized rivalry with Conor McGregor, and the two men split fights and have yet to face off in a rubber match. Evidently though, Diaz didn't take too kindly to an outsider like Jake Paul poking at McGregor in such an insulting fashion. The native of Stockton, California tweeted at Jake Paul stating that he would end up with his ass whooped for real somewhere talking like that. Jake Paul quickly responded telling Diaz, "You saw what happened to the other Nate," in reference to Nate Robinson, only for the UFC star to take the bait again, telling Jake Paul's older brother Logan to check his little bitch before somebody else does. Given Diaz's penchant for boxing, this might actually be a fascinating match to see inside the UFC's octagon, but naturally Diaz is not just a boxer, he's also one of the best submission artists inside of the world of MMA. And given that Jake Paul has zero experience on the ground, the likelihood would be that despite giving up almost 30 pounds of weight, Diaz would take him down and easily dominate him on the mat. Number 3, Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo would give up plenty of size to Jake Paul, but it wouldn't matter. While the UFC would likely never put on a size mismatch that would pit a fighter standing at 5'4" and weighing 135 pounds against a 6'1", 200-pound opponent, there can simply be no doubt that if it came to it, former UFC bantamweight champion Henry Cejudo would destroy Jake Paul. Cejudo recently called Jake Paul on Instagram, stating that, "I hear you like to pick on smaller retired athletes. Well, here I am." Thus far, at least, Jake Paul has focused his energy on taunting Conor McGregor rather than the smaller Cejudo. And to tell the truth, he's probably right to do so. Not only is Cejudo, who hung up his gloves in May after defeating UFC legend Dominic Cruz, one of the most highly rated fighters in UFC history, he's also one of the promotion's greatest ever wrestlers. A 2008 Olympic gold medalist, if Cejudo were to fight Jake Paul, there's no way the other YouTuber would be able to stay vertical. And if Cejudo were to put him on his back, then Jake Paul's size advantage would be completely negated. Instead, the YouTube star would likely fall victim to the brutal ground and pound of Triple C, who destroyed the likes of TJ Dillashaw and Marlon Moraes in such a way in the UFC. The size difference in this fight would be ludicrous, but there can be little doubt that Cejudo, the smaller man, would win handily. Number 4, Amanda Nunes. An intergender match between a YouTube star like Jake Paul and the UFC's reigning female bantamweight and featherweight champion Amanda Nunes sounds ridiculous, but incredibly, it's already been modeled and mooted by UFC President Dana White. Sure, White is probably joking around when he claimed that he was thinking of letting Amanda Nunes knock his ass out in the wake of Paul's vulgar challenge to Conor McGregor, but the truth is that if the two stepped in the octagon, that'd probably be the result. Sure, Nunes would be giving up around 55 pounds of weight and quite a bit of height too, but that probably wouldn't matter to the Lioness. After all, Nunes had beaten former UFC champions like Ronda Rousey and Chris Cyborg, women that seemed almost invincible before Nunes got a hold of them. And more to the point, while Nunes loves to use her fists, she's also adept at landing brutal kicks, just ask Holly Holm. And she's a bit more capable grappler too. If Jake Paul were to step into a fight with her, the likelihood is that the YouTube star would find himself strangled and tapping out in quick fashion. Number 5. Valentina Shevchenko. Valentina Shevchenko is one of the UFC's greatest fighters pound for pound. If one female UFC champion in Amanda Nunes could destroy Jake Paul, then could the same be said for another in the form of current UFC flyweight champion Valentina Shevchenko? Despite the fact that she'd be giving up around 75 pounds of weight, the answer is definitely yes. Sure, Jake Paul is a good athlete who appears to hit hard, but would he be able to land a blow against Shevchenko, who has an extensive background as a world-class Muay Thai fighter? Probably not. And even if he did, he'd likely eat something nasty on the counter, or find himself slammed to the ground before punishing the mat. This would be an embarrassing loss for Jake Paul, but in reality, there should be no shame in anyone, male or female, falling to a fighter with the talents of Shevchenko. This brings us to the end of our video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit like if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any of our videos in the future. Also watch the 2 videos that are on your screen because I'm sure you'll love them. With that, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.